Today, we're diving into an explainer that steps into a very quiet, completely vanished world. We're going to look at an archetypal text that holds a deeply, almost uncomfortably unsettling psychological truth. It's a story etched into clay over 3 millennia ago, a story that maps the darkest, quietest corners of the human mind with a kind of clinical precision that is still, quite frankly, completely haunting today. To really grasp this, we have to start by setting a baseline of absolute absence. Around 1200 BCE, this sudden catastrophic event known as the Bronze Age collapse swept through the ancient world. An entire civilization, the Hittites, was completely erased. Just a sudden, absolute silence falling over their great capital city of Hattusa. Today, all that remains of them are these silent clay tablets, buried in the earth. And the sheer scale of this disappearance is just staggering. The Hittite Empire rose around 1600 BCE. They became this massive geopolitical power. They even signed the famous Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt in 1259 BCE. But then, by 1200 BCE, they vanish. This civilization ended entirely 3,200 years ago. There are 0 living practitioners of their traditions today, so what survives on these ancient clay tablets aren't literal histories. They're archetypal symbols. They're stories that speak to us across the millennia about the profound vulnerabilities of our own psychology. Part 1. The shoes on the wrong feet. In ancient Hittite mythology, the legendary archetypal symbol of Telepinu represented the life-giving force of agriculture, fertility, and the capacity for growth. He was essentially the animating principle that made life actually worth living. And one day, for reasons the myth deliberately leaves completely unspecified, he becomes intensely angry. Now, the text reveals this really strange, highly specific detail about his departure. He doesn't just storm off. As the text translates it, he puts his right shoe on his left foot and his left shoe on his right foot. Wearing the wrong shoes, he withdraws into a dark underground meadow, and he just disappears into total silence. The myth never explains exactly why he left, but ancient scholars and modern psychologists alike immediately recognize the intense resonance of this detail. Because emotional withdrawal is not rational, right? It's not organized. It is disoriented. It is wrong-footed. We rarely make this clean, logical decision to become emotionally unavailable. We simply find ourselves turned away, reacting to this unnamed exhaustion or confusion, our shoes on the wrong feet, already moving away from the world before we've even fully processed why. Part 2. The horror of stillness. Because when Telepinu vanishes, the world doesn't burn. It doesn't flood. There's no dramatic apocalypse here. It just quietly and horrifyingly stops. This maps out such an agonizing disconnect. The physical world continues, but the psychological reality is utterly absent. Smoke fills the houses, but the fires give absolutely no warmth. Mothers physically hold their children, but the children cannot be reached. The food is sitting right there, but it does not nourish. The bodies of humans and animals continue to exist, but that capacity to feel sustained by them has just evaporated. It's the unremarkable becoming entirely unreachable, mist settling over the windows, the fields going completely still. The Telepinu myth describes with remarkable precision the experience of watching the physical world carry on, while your own capacity to feel connected to it completely shuts down. It's like everything that used to bring joy or comfort is suddenly trapped behind invisible glass. Part 3. The anatomy of withdrawal. What the Hittites carved into clay 3,200 years ago is exactly what modern clinical psychologists study today. We are looking at a masterclass in the phenomenology of severe psychological detachment. Consider the clinical definition of anhedonia. It's the inability to feel pleasure or nourishment from activities that previously provided them. That maps literally onto this ancient text. When the animating principle withdraws, the sheep abandon their lambs in the fields. The grain refuses to grow. Food loses its taste. The warmth stops warming. It is the exact subjective experience of a major depressive episode. Or look at how it mirrors attachment theory, specifically this concept of emotional unavailability. When the attunement of a caregiver is withdrawn, the myth observes this haunting sequence. The mother stops responding, and in turn, the child loses the fundamental capacity to be touched by care. They become fundamentally unreachable. And we see this perfectly reflected in emotional neglect phenomenology. Research shows that the most profound psychological damage often comes from the absence of attunement rather than active harm. So, the crucial point here is that the world in the Telepinu myth doesn't actively hurt anyone. The ultimate horror is the quiet, unremarkable removal of what previously made life worth living. It's that terrifying realization that you have simply stopped being able to feel. Part 4. The problem of waking. The world is frozen, starving for connection, and a desperate search begins to find the animating principle. The sun god sends a great eagle, but the eagle searches the entire world and finds nothing. Finally, the mother goddess, Hannah-Anna, sends a single tiny bee. So an intervention is finally attempted. This bee finds Telepinu sleeping deeply in the dark underground meadow. Instructed to wake him, it stings him. And the result is absolutely disastrous. Telepinu wakes in a blinding, destructive rage. His anger is now far worse than it was before, and he begins to actively cause destruction. Being woken from emotional withdrawal before you are ready produces defensive rage, not healing. What the Hittite mythological tradition understood about withdrawal was that violently violating someone's psychological detachment is a complete disaster. You cannot simply sting someone out of profound depression. You can't force them to reconnect before they're actually capable of it. It only produces the vicious anger of someone whose last line of defense has been breached. Intervention, true intervention, requires gentle ceremony. It requires patience. The myth shows us that calming this defensive rage and coaxing the animating principle back from the dark meadow takes measured, careful ritual. It's a delicate process of attunement. It is not a sharp, aggressive sting. Part 5. When meaning returns. Eventually, through careful, gentle ceremony, the rage is finally calmed. The animating principle is brought back to the world on the wings of an eagle, carrying with it life, warmth, and desire. And the myth is very specific about how this happens. The capacity to experience life as worth living returns completely. Just as the withdrawal was absolute, the return of meaning is total. That vital connection between physical reality and psychological nourishment is finally restored. The mist clears. The fires give warmth again. The food nourishes. The mother and child can actually reach one another once again. Ultimately, we're left staring into a silence that has lasted 3,200 years, reading an ancient text that perfectly describes our modern minds. What gives life its quality of being worth living? And what can we understand about ourselves from what happens when that completely withdraws, without clear explanation?